Okay,
yes,
very good.
Perfectly, yes.
So again, thank you very much for inviting me. And my intention here is to show you what we did since 2016 in Luxembourg with the SpaceResources.lu initiative. And then more recently, since 2020, with the creation of the European Space Resource Innovation Center, ESRIC. Now, as most of you know, we launched an initiative in 2016 called SpaceResources.lu, where we aim to contribute to the peaceful exploration and sustainable utilization of space resources for the benefit of humankind. And actually, when we launched this initiative, we realized that, of course, there are a lot of opportunities connected to space resource utilization for further exploration, for further science, further understanding of our solar system on one hand, and on the other hand, for making the whole space ecosystem, the in-space ecosystem, much more efficient and also creating new opportunities on that side, which then would also then benefit the current space sector and terrestrial sector. So there are a lot of different opportunities, and I won't cover these here because I also suppose that you heard of them in the last 2 days. But of course, if you want to see these opportunities, you have different challenges to solve. And we heard now just a lot on the legal and regular challenge. That's a very important one. And it needs to be solved. And it's one of several challenges. And I think I just want to recall quickly that, of course, you also have the technical challenge to solve. Lots of technologies still need to be matured, to be tested in orbit, and to actually see if all of this actually can work. We also need to have a better understanding of the different resources that actually exist, where they exist, in what quantities. So lots of challenges also in the technical domain. And then we have the financial challenge. All of this will cost a lot of money. And generally, I would say the governments and agencies do not have that money alone. So you need to find ways to attract also private investment. This is what we also see in all the rest of the space sector at the moment, with more and more private money flowing into it, which of course helps to do more also and to do it in many ways also better. And then last but not least, if you want to attract the private investors, you need also markets. You need to find the right business models to in the end create new markets that are then also interesting for these new investors. So all of this is of course very much connected, and I share a lot of the issues that were presented by Guyo that really show how complex this is and how everything is somehow connected. Now, what we did in Luxembourg, and this is a slide just showing what we mean with space resources, but I think that's not something I need to go into very much details here. Of course, we talk about space resources that can be found in space for different applications that, again, support exploration, like life support for astronauts or housing or radiation shielding, but also more generally, manufacturing of equipment in space, manufacturing of infrastructures, and the production, for example, of propellant for launches and spacecrafts, which could then benefit both further exploration, but also, again, the current space sector and terrestrial sectors. Now, this is an example of a moon base, which I actually very much like, because very often you see moon bases where you only have the habitation, but on that slide from the European Space Agency, you actually see also all the infrastructure that is around the housing itself, which of course will be very much necessary if we want to sustain human presence on the moon. Now, how did we address all this in Luxembourg? Our strategy was since 2016 based on these 5 pillars that you see here, and that show actually how in the end we want to move forward. So we thought, okay, because it is so complex and because all of these different challenges are actually very much connected, we will progress on all. We try to progress on all the challenges step by step and in a coordinated way, let's say, addressing, of course, the political level on a national and international side, the legal and regulatory framework, and I will also come to that one in more details, the research and education, because if we create such new activities, we also need the right talents and workforce to work in this. We need to develop also additional competencies in research. We need to work on innovation and R&D, especially with companies as well. And we need, again, to address the finance challenge, to also develop new funding instruments and financing instruments to bring in additional investment. Now, the good thing is that since we launched SpaceResources.lu, actually in 2016, we felt rather alone, I would say, on a worldwide level. We were one of the very first that put, let's say, this topic at a very high political level in terms of policy. But it changed so much in the past 6 years. And I guess you have seen this also in the other presentations that were shown during this forum. It has tremendously changed, and it is now really a topic that is being addressed on many different levels. And that allows, of course, to also progress much, much faster. Now, to give you a few examples of things where we also actually were very much involved as Luxembourg. On the political level, we very much engaged on an international side. Of course, we cooperate very closely with the European Space Agency. That's our main partner. Being one of the member states of the European Space Agency, we very early signed a cooperation agreement with ESA to work on different studies, especially with the studies also showing the opportunities that exist, because I think that's always very important to keep in mind, that we do this actually to increase the opportunities and benefit in the end for everyone. Also, with ESA together, we worked on different projects and events, and of course one very important project for us now is the European Space Resource Innovation Center that I will explain a bit later. Then we also signed agreements with different countries. We signed an agreement in particular also with China to exchange on this topic, both on the legal and regulatory matters, but also to cooperate more deeply in research, science, and more generally industrial cooperation. We signed agreements with different agencies, with, of course, focusing more on the technological side, NASA, but then also German, French, and Italian agencies. We became also a member of international fora, and I can mention here maybe the ISAC-G, which is also a very good example bit to show what happened. So the ISAC-G is the International Space Exploration Coordination Group. It's now a grouping of 27 space agencies all around the world. And actually in 2016, Space Resources was not even really mentioned at ISAC-G. Of course, it was somewhere in the documents, but when you looked at the high-level documents, it didn't really play a role. And in the meantime, that again changed very much. There was a specific report produced by ISAC-G to show how important it is to consider space resource utilization also in the plans of the exploration going back to the moon and then further to Mars. And then another example of an agreement that we signed is with the European Investment Bank, which is actually the largest multilateral investment bank in the world, where we also signed an agreement to see, okay, how can we develop new funding instruments to also benefit space resources. So a lot of things on the international level, and of course for us this is absolutely key. It's clear that one country alone will not solve the many challenges. You need to cooperate here on an international level. Then coming to the legal and regulatory matters, so a lot of things were already said by Guyu. Our intention here more generally was to say, okay, it is very clear that in the long term we will need an international framework to deal with space resource utilization. And in the meantime, we try to go step by step to start addressing the different issues. And that's the main reason why we said we will also enact a dedicated law on space resource utilization on a national level. Luxembourg was the second country worldwide to do this after the US. But in the meantime, of course, you probably know that also Japan and the United Arab Emirates have similar laws. So this is something which is progressing and which I see as a sort of addition to, of course, the international discussions on this. Luxembourg was also one of the 8 founding signatories of the Artemis Accords. Again, these are accords between countries, so it's multilateral. It's not an international framework, but it allows to start addressing different challenges, different aspects, and to propose solutions that can then also be taken into account into various discussions coming later. And then, of course, absolutely key for us was the Hague International Space Resource Governance Working Group. I really mentioned it a lot because I think it was a very valuable work where of course many of you also participated, which was very interesting because it involved different countries, but also different experts from industry, from academia, from agencies, from governments, and really trying to, in an informal way, progress and propose different building blocks here. And then last but definitely not least, of course, is the United Nations COP Wars, where we also from the very start tried to push the topic of space resource utilization, because in the end, that's where we will need to find an agreement. And again, Guyo, I think you mentioned it, that things are progressing very slowly there. It's true. It's very hard to find an agreement between nearly 100 countries. Everything needs to be agreed by consensus, so it is definitely very slow. But the good news, it is still progressing. When I look back to the discussions we had in 2016, it was very, very how to say, controversial. It was very hard to actually agree on certain things. In the meantime, I think the fundamental agreement is there that this should be feasible, that we should all together progress, and at the same time, of course, find an international framework to deal with it. And the good news last year, even though we were in the COVID crisis, we still managed to kick off the working group on space resources, where we have now an agreement to do this. And then, of course, for this year, we will need to work on the mandate, on the timelines, on the work program. So there is still a lot of work. But again, I think the good news here is that it is progressing. Then coming to some other pillars, of course, that we develop. For us, the commercial utilization is key. I think that's corresponding very much to the policy that we have in Luxembourg to support private companies more generally in the space sector. And of course, we have now also some companies that work in space resource utilization, and some of these were also on the agenda of your event here. For us, supporting companies is a way also to develop sustainable activities, because if you have successful business models, you're then also building something that can work on the more long term. And generally what we try here is to connect these future markets of space resource utilization with existing markets here on Earth or in the current space sector, to find in the end models that also work in the short and medium term while waiting for these longer term markets. Then in public research, that was also very key for us. So we worked with the different research organizations in Luxembourg to start developing also new research, new science connected to space resources. And then on the talent side, we launched new interdisciplinary space master to train students. That also includes modules on space resource exploration and utilization. And we have now actually the first graduates from that program that start working in the different companies and organizations. And we actually also had some students from China, so I was very happy to see this. So all in all, we did a lot, and of course in parallel the activities on a worldwide level in other countries also developed very much, with many countries now becoming interested or being interested in this topic. And so for us, it was clear also for Luxembourg, but more generally for Europe, that we needed to stay on this path to continue pushing and to do more. And this is the reason why, in the end, we launched the European Space Resource Innovation Center in 2020, together with the European Space Agency and the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, which is one of the main research institutes in Luxembourg. So with ESRIC, we want to establish an international center of expertise for addressing, on one side, scientific and technical aspects, so very much connected to research, and on the other side, also business and economic aspects, all related to the use of space resources, again, for further human and robotic exploration, but also to lay the basis for future in-space economy. Now, ESRIC is addressing four main pillars. So I just mentioned research, which of course is at the heart of what we do in ESRIC, trying to build up research all along the value chain of space resources with dedicated labs and capabilities. And then the business side, where we try to bring in from the start also industry, established players, but also startups. We have a startup program that we have launched to encourage new companies in that domain. And then very much very important here is that we are actually seeing the build-up of a community in Luxembourg, in Europe, but also generally worldwide. Because this is really a nascent field that is developing fast, we see a new community. And for us, it's also important that ESRIC helps to bring this community together, to share ideas, to connect to people, and to, in the end, and also manage the knowledge that is being produced, to make it available to everyone, to share it so that everyone can progress together. Now, more specifically on the research side, what we have established now is the work again on the value chain of space resources. So really going from prospecting and mining the resources, understanding where they are, how many there are, and how you extract them from the ground, then processing them, bringing them to products and feedstock and consumables that you can actually then use, and then down the value chain to going to real applications, different applications of using these space resources. And of course, at the moment, there's a big focus on the moon at ESA, but more generally also in other space agencies. So the initial focus of ESRIC is also on the moon, trying to use the lunar regolith to produce oxygen, hydrogen, and metals for different applications. We have already signed commercial partnerships. So just before summer, we signed a partnership with Air Liquide, one of the largest, the world's largest gas producers, they are very much interested to also purify oxygen on the moon and hydrogen as well, to in the end support this exploration. And then on the other hand, Airbus, of course, is the largest space company in Europe that also signed an agreement with ESRIC to contribute to this development of technologies related to space resources. And then a few words on the Startup Support Program. This is a program that we launched at IAC in October in Dubai, which is the world's first startup support program focused completely on space resource utilization. So again, what we want to do here is to find early stage space resource startups to, in the end, contribute also to this new ecosystem. By that, to accelerate in the end the next generation of space resources ideas. And the whole program, of course, helps the startups to define their business plans, to attract first customers, and in the end to also contribute to this creation of new markets. So the program is actually built on 3 phases, which you see here. I won't go into the details here, but what I mentioned is, what I just want to mention here is that the first phase is actually open for any startup or any team worldwide. We will select 5 startups for this first phase, and the current call is open until the 23rd of January. And then these startups will be coached during 3 months by experts from ESRIC, from LIST, from ESA, to work on their business plan and also on their technologies. And then the best startup of these first phases can then move into phase 2, where we are more closely, where we are closer to an incubator, incubating the companies and further bringing them to the next step. And then last but not least, I want to mention the Space Resource Week. So this is an event that we have developed together with the European Space Agency since a few years. And again, last year we were able, despite the COVID crisis, to organize it in a hybrid way. It was a 4-day event around space resources, covering all kinds of different topics, a bit like you cover here in the Space Resource Forum in China, looking at more general political topics, legal and regulatory, of course, but also scientific and technical and business and economics topics. And we had actually more than 1,000 participants from 66 countries over these 4 days, more than 120 speakers. So we are very much happy with this event and will of course continue to support it in Luxembourg. And here I want to make you aware that the next edition will be held this year from the 3rd to 6th of May. And of course, everyone is very much invited to also contribute to this event. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your attention. And again, I wanted to just maybe broaden a bit the discussion on the legal and regulatory matters, recalling that this is actually extremely important, of course, to address. But at the same time, we need always to be reminded that this is part of a of a much more general discussion we need to have with many different challenges that need to be addressed. And of course, these addressing the technical challenges, the financial challenges, the business and market related challenges also then feeds into the legal and regulatory discussion, because of course you need to know what you want in the end to address and regulate. So again, I coming back to what Guyo said, I think that's really the best summary, is that this is all a matter of political will. And I'm very confident if everyone works together in a very constructive way, also at UN COPUOS, that we will find solutions for this. And by that then also create huge opportunities for the benefit of everyone. Thank you very much.